Yesterday, we saw the commencement of the Liberal Party's official English debate in Montreal. This comes after the debate in French the day previous, and many of the criticisms that the French debate received was that candidates didn't seem to be much different than the others in terms of policies, and in most senses it seemed like a more or less a debate, but rather a good friendship between all the candidates that were just meeting up like good old friends. So beyond that, the Liberal Party then had their English debate the day after, where we saw some more sparks fly off and a little bit more contention between the candidates. And here's an interesting piece that I found on the National Post where Karina Gould suggests that some of her rivals are not really, in her words, liberals, but just conservative copies of Pierre Poilievre. And why this is interesting is because we've heard a lot of rhetoric in the media that Pierre Poilievre does not have any platform, or he has a weak platform, and the other candidates like Mark Carney or even Chrystia Freeland have more substance to their campaigns. But from what now many are seeing is that they can see that a lot of the points that people like Mark Carney are suggesting, it seems that as if they are just poaching off the conservative points on in terms of the economy, cutting spending, cutting taxes, and improving investment into the Canadian economy. So Karina Gould here, she took more of a position as a traditional far left liberal, more socially adept, but then rather than being a economic liberal. But in that regard, she saw herself taking more points on the welfare and social welfare and those policies, and she stood by her mandate that the Liberal Party has had for the past 10 years, and she stood by it and supported it. And many, of course, will take issue with that because a lot of people are upset with the Liberals for the past 10 years and the decade. To see somebody support that agenda and that platform they've held, it doesn't really look that good on her part. But one analysis that she did make that was correct was the idea that the other candidates just seem like conservative light, in her own words. She says right here, there were a number of my colleagues who were using some of the same language and some of the same ideas as Pierre Poilievre. Now, isn't this a little bit ironic, considering the fact that many of the people in the media have been saying that somehow Mark Carney is a fresh breath of air coming into the Liberal Party, and he has some sort of substance that is greater than Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives, and instead, it seems that he's actually just poaching off points from them. And if we look at his debate performance, he is actually questioning the economic performance of the Liberal government in the last 5 years and makes point to attack the immigration policies that Mr. Trudeau had, as well as the spending habits. And he made mention of that the spending in this country is outpacing the GDP growth as well as the salary growth in the Canadian population, and that is a point of concern. But I don't know if many might realize that Mr. Carney was a major economic advisor to Justin Trudeau for the last 5 to 6 years. And on top of that, he's been a very close friend of Justin Trudeau, having been an unofficial finance minister of his party. So it seems that there's a bit of a missing message between the candidates on what actually needs to be fixed in the Liberal Party. And when you actually get to that point where you find out what needs to be done for the party as well as Canada, you end up looking more like a conservative, because the Conservatives have already been touting those points for months on months and months on end now, and it is utterly ignorant to say that they haven't been advocating for, of course, increased investment into the economy, axing taxes, as well as focusing more on building a strong, stable economy. Because if we look at the state we are in right now, wages haven't been growing, spending has been going out of control, and it seems unwise to be talking about funding even more money into social programs that are badly planned and that have really no great effect on alleviating the suffering that people are going through right now. So there's a mess that's been made and a mess that needs to be fixed. Candidates like Mark Carney, smart guy, he knows what's going on, and he knows that he can't, in good conscience, stand behind the liberal policy of the last 5 to 6 years. But in doing so, he won't have much effect because the Liberal Party is still stuck in that same mindset of that they somehow have had a good effect on the country, especially in the last 5 to 6 years. So he will always be constrained by those, limits within the party, within those factions within the party, and it will be hard to get out of. So, of course, now it's becoming more apparent that the major alternative to the Liberal Party is, of course, the Conservatives, and the policies that Liberals are now taking are just indeed conservative policies masked as Liberal policies. So it is very, very, stark to see now that, the media is portraying one message, but the reality is different. And I'd have to say also another point that I was impressed by Frank Biles' performance in the debate in terms of freshness coming from the Liberal Party. I think he brings in the most fresh voice. He has served as an MP, but in terms of being associated with the current establishment in the party, he has more of distance, considering he only served for 4 years from 2015 to 2019. And he brings in more of the classical liberal that we've seen from Paul Martin and John Crescent, and more economically focused and balanced centrist approach. So if they knew what was good for them, they'd bring in him as leader, and they potentially numb the effects of the oncoming onslaught that they might face in the federal election. Though it likely will be Mark Carney who's going to be in power, but Carney does face the issue that he is constrained by, of course, his liberal tendencies, as well as the factions within the party. And also, not to mention, he is an outsider who hasn't lived in Canada for many decades. And though he's a seasoned finance professional, he doesn't really hold the understanding of the average Canadian that other politicians who have served long term would. Having experience in politics for years on end now, Mr. Poilievre has a better perspective in that regard. And some might say that works against him somehow, but I say it works for him because he knows how things run and he knows what needs to be done, as he's been involved for more than 2 decades now. That's just my perspective on the debate and the Liberal Party race. We'll see who becomes leader in the next couple of days. But thank you for watching again, and remember to leave your comments down below and make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you very much.